Two skyscrapers that have defined the Detroit skyline for 50 years are about to be torn down. Not collapsed, not abandoned, but demolished deliberately by their own owner. Each tower is 39 stories tall. Each one will cost more than $50 million just to bring down. When the dust clears, 6 acres of riverfront that have been sealed off behind concrete walls since 1977 will finally open to the people of Detroit for the first time in half a century. This is the Renaissance Center, the most famous building in Detroit, the home of General Motors for nearly 30 years, and as of early 2026, almost completely empty. The plan to demolish part of it costs $1.6 billion. It hinges on hundreds of millions in public money, and it raises one genuinely uncomfortable question. What happens when a city's most iconic skyscraper loses its biggest tenant and becomes the very building the city is desperate to tear down? To understand how the Renaissance Center became a $1.6 billion demolition project, you have to look at the original vision. The story begins in the early 1970s, when Detroit was grappling with population decline, industrial challenges, and deep economic uncertainty following the 1967 riots. Henry Ford II envisioned a bold project that could reverse this trajectory. He wanted to build a city within a city, a towering complex that combined offices, hotels, shopping, and restaurants. Construction began in 1973 with a massive budget of $337 million, equivalent to roughly $3 billion today. The design was ambitious, 5 interconnected towers arranged around a central plaza, creating a massive fortress of glass and steel. The Central Hotel Tower rose 73 stories above the riverfront, becoming the tallest building in Michigan. When the Renaissance Center opened in 1977, it was a statement of hope. It was a demonstration that even amid urban decline, Detroit could still reach for the sky. The architecture was celebrated as a marvel of integrated urban design. But the phrase "city within a city" was not just a marketing slogan, it was a design philosophy. And in retrospect, those 5 words explain exactly why the building is now being torn apart. Before we dive into the fatal design flaw that doomed the Renaissance Center, a quick question. Do you enjoy these deep dives into massive engineering failures, abandoned megaprojects, and the hidden stories of our cities? If so, subscribe now and turn on the notification bell. Here on MadeFor, we bring you the most fascinating high-stakes stories behind the world's biggest structures every single week. Subscribe using the link in the description or click the button below. Your support is what allows us to keep making these documentaries. Now let us look at how the dream of the Renaissance Center became an urban planning nightmare. The answer to the Renaissance Center's failure isn't really about urban decay. It is about a design flaw baked into the project from day one. The complex wasn't designed to be a building that interacted with Detroit. It was designed to be a self-contained universe, sealed off from the streets around it. To enter the Renaissance Center, you didn't walk in off a bustling sidewalk. You navigated through a concrete bunker. The original design featured massive defensive berms, earth and concrete walls, that physically separated the towers from Jefferson Avenue, the major road running past the front door. There were no ground floor retail windows, no outdoor cafes, and absolutely no reason to walk past the building unless you were going inside. And once you were inside, the layout was incredibly confusing. Circular corridors, multi-level walkways, and identical-looking towers made navigation a nightmare. Architecture critic William H. White called the design manifestly defensive. The New York Times described it as an island of exclusion, paradoxically cut off from the downtown it was intended to rescue. Wayne State University urban studies professor Jeff Horner called it a great example of everything wrong with urban planning in the United States in the 1970s. The genius of the Renaissance Center was supposed to be that it gave people a reason to come downtown. The cruelty of it was that, once you were there, it gave you no reason to leave the building. The financial reality of this design flaw hit hard. In 1996, General Motors bought the entire Renaissance Center to serve as its global headquarters. The purchase price was just $73 million. To put that number in context, General Motors bought the most expensive private development in American history for less than 22 cents on the dollar, compared to its original 1977 construction cost. That price tells you everything about how the market valued the fortress-like property by the mid-90s. But General Motors did something genuinely smart. They poured $500 million into renovating the complex in the early 2000s. They hired SOM, the architecture firm behind the Burj Khalifa, to fix what they could. They tore down the worst of the defensive concrete berms. They cut new openings into the podium base. They added the Winter Garden, a soaring glass atrium facing the river. They even spent millions building a circulation ring so people could find the restrooms without getting lost in the identical towers. By the mid-2000s, the Renaissance Center actually worked as a corporate campus. General Motors employees filled the towers, and the building had a pulse. But the renovation could not fix the fundamental site plan. The RenCen still sat on the wrong side of an eight-lane road that severed it from the rest of downtown. The massive 1.5 million square feet retail and parking base was still a labyrinth, and the building still turned its bulk toward the river, physically blocking the public from reaching the water. You could renovate the surface, but you could not renovate the philosophy. And then the world changed. The COVID-19 pandemic accelerated a shift away from massive centralized office towers. By 2023, office vacancy rates in Detroit reached 25%. General Motors realized that only 20% of its pre-pandemic employees were regularly using the office space. The Renaissance Center, built for a different workforce and a different era of corporate life, could not accommodate the open-plan layouts and collaboration spaces General Motors now required. On April 15, 2024, General Motors announced the unthinkable. It was leaving the Renaissance Center. The automaker decided to relocate its headquarters to the new Hudson's Detroit development, just a few blocks away. By early 2026, the massive complex was rapidly emptying out. Average daily workers dropped to just 20% of 2019 levels. Major tenants like Urban Science and the law firm Dykema Gossett packed up and left. Small business owners inside the complex described it as a ghost town, with reduced security leading to vagrants sheltering in the empty corridors. The building that had defined Detroit for 50 years was suddenly facing the very real threat of becoming a 5.5 million square foot abandoned monolith. To save the skyline, General Motors and Bedrock, Dan Gilbert's real estate company, unveiled an unprecedented $1.6 billion redevelopment plan. If carried out, it will be the largest voluntary skyscraper demolition in world history. The engineering of this teardown is staggering. 2 towers are coming down, the 300 Tower and the 400 Tower. These are the 2 39-story office buildings closest to the Detroit River, the exact structures that physically block the public from reaching the waterfront. Each tower rises 522 feet from the ground, built with reinforced concrete cores, structural steel framing, and heavy glass curtain walls. Bringing them down is not the kind of thing you do with a wrecking ball or a spectacular implosion. The work will involve a multi-year process of selective top-down deconstruction, taking the buildings apart floor by floor from the highest level down. Bedrock's incoming chief executive officer, Jared Fleischer, confirmed that demolishing each of these towers will cost north of $50 million on its own. Once both towers are gone, the next demolition target is the connecting podium, the massive retail base layer that wraps around all the towers and is the single most criticized architectural element of the entire complex. When the podium goes, 6 acres of land currently locked under concrete will be opened up. In its place, Bedrock plans a new pedestrian promenade running directly from Jefferson Avenue down to the Detroit Riverwalk. For the first time in 50 years, there will be a clear sightline from the heart of downtown all the way to the water. The remaining towers will be radically transformed. The 100 Tower will be converted entirely into residential housing, with 384 units of market rate and affordable apartments. The 200 tower will stay as modernized office space, and the centerpiece, the 73-story Marriott Hotel, will remain the tallest building in Michigan, but it will be cut down from the inside. The upper 20 floors will be converted into luxury rental apartments, and an observation deck will be added. From the outside, the iconic cylindrical skyline stays exactly the same. The fortress that surrounds it goes. But nothing about this $1.6 billion project is moving forward without public money, and that is where the plan has hit a massive political wall. Bedrock has committed roughly $1 billion, and GM has pledged $250 million. That leaves a massive funding gap of roughly $350 million that the developers say is absolutely essential for the public infrastructure portions of the project. In November 2025, the Detroit Downtown Development Authority approved $75 million to help fund the demolition of the podium and the creation of the new public plazas. But the bigger fight is over the remaining hundreds of millions. Bedrock is asking the state of Michigan to expand the transformational brownfield program, which allows developers to recapture state tax revenue to offset costs. As of April 2026, this request is completely stalled in the Michigan legislature. The political optics are brutal. Republican House Speaker Matt Hall has called using public money to demolish a privately owned building a non-starter. Democratic politicians have also criticized the deal, pointing out that GM has already received millions in state subsidies for other projects. Bedrock argues that the public money is strictly for public infrastructure, the parks, the promenade, and riverfront access, and that without subsidy, large-scale residential conversion in Detroit is economically unfeasible. But until the state approves the funding, the entire $1.6 billion redevelopment is frozen. The joint venture agreement between GM and Bedrock is set to expire, and the towers remain empty. Every demolition of this scale is really a decision about what kind of city the next generation gets to inherit, and which mistakes from the past we are finally willing to undo. For 50 years, the Renaissance Center has been one of the most recognizable skylines in America, while simultaneously serving as a textbook case study in everything wrong with mid-century urban planning. The plan now is to keep the iconic part and demolish the rest. Save the skyline, tear out the fortress, and open the riverfront to a city that has been trying to reach its own water for half a century. If the funding comes through and the plan works, Detroit gets 6 acres of new public parks, hundreds of new housing units, and a downtown that finally connects to the river. But if the politics fall apart in Lansing and the funding fails, what was supposed to be a partial demolition turns into something far worse. A 5.5 million square foot, half-empty fortress that nobody can afford to fix and nobody is willing to tear down. That is the choice in front of Detroit right now. Not whether the Renaissance Center matters, it does. The choice is whether the building has any future at all in a form the city can actually use. What do you think? Should public tax dollars be used to demolish a privately owned skyscraper to create public parks? Or should GM and Bedrock foot the entire $1.6 billion bill themselves? Drop your take in the comments below. Hit subscribe for more stories like this, and we'll see you on the next one.